Welcome to Hidden Coin Value. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? That seemingly worthless penny sitting in your drawer, the one you almost threw away last week, might actually be worth more than your car, your house, or even your wildest dreams combined. Today we're diving deep into the world of the 1944 wheat penny, a coin so deceptively ordinary that millions of Americans have held it in their hands without ever realizing they were touching a potential fortune worth up to $70 million. Yes, you heard that right, $70 million for a single penny. But here's where it gets even more exciting. After we uncover every secret detail about this incredible 1944 treasure, we have another coin waiting in the wings that's valued even higher, reaching a staggering $80 million. I'm not going to reveal which coin that is just yet, but trust me when I say you need to stay with me until the very end, because what we're about to discover could literally change your financial future forever. So before you skip ahead or click away, ask yourself this: can you really afford to miss out on information that could turn your pocket change into generational wealth? Now let's talk about why the 1944 wheat penny has collectors, investors, and everyday Americans frantically searching through their change jars with magnifying glasses and desperate hope in their eyes. The year 1944 sits right in the middle of World War II. A time when America was pouring every ounce of its industrial might into the war effort, and that included the metals used to make our everyday coins. Copper was absolutely critical for the war. It was needed for shell casings, electrical wiring, communication equipment, and countless other military applications. Because of this desperate need, the United States Mint made a historic decision in 1943. They stopped making pennies out of copper entirely and instead produced them from zinc-coated steel, creating those famous wartime steel pennies that look almost silver. But here's where the story takes an absolutely fascinating turn that created one of the most valuable era coins in American history. When 1944 rolled around and the mint switched back to copper pennies using recycled ammunition shell casings, something unexpected happened in the chaos of wartime production. A small number of steel planchets, those are the blank metal discs used to stamp coins, from 1943 somehow remained in the machinery and got mixed in with the copper planchets being used for the 1944 pennies. The result? A tiny handful of 1944 pennies were accidentally struck on steel planchets instead of copper, creating what numismatists call a wrong planchet error, and these mistakes are now among the most sought-after coins in existence. But wait, there's another version of this error that's even rarer and more valuable. Some 1944 pennies were struck on leftover bronze planchets from 1943 that were supposed to be copper but had slightly different metal compositions due to wartime recycling processes, and these variations create an entire spectrum of rarities that collectors obsess over. The value of a 1944 wheat penny can range anywhere from 3 cents for a common worn example in circulated condition all the way up to that mind-blowing $70 million figure for the rarest era varieties in pristine condition. Now you might be wondering how we get from 3 cents to 70 million, and that's exactly what makes this coin so thrilling. It's all about knowing what to look for. A regular 1944 wheat penny made of copper with no errors might be worth anywhere from 10 cents to $50 depending on its condition and mint mark, and while that's a nice little bonus if you find one in excellent shape, it's not going to change your life. But if you happen to find a 1944 penny that was struck on a steel planchet, that magnetic, silvery mistake that should never have existed, you're looking at a coin that regularly sells for anywhere from $75,000 to over $200,000 at auction, and in absolutely perfect mint state condition, some experts believe it could reach into the millions. Then there are the 1944 pennies with dramatic die errors, double dies, off-center strikes, or repunched mint marks, and these can be worth anywhere from $500 to $20,000 depending on how pronounced the error is. And here's something that will make your heart race. Authentication experts estimate that there are still dozens of these error coins sitting in old collections, estate sales, and yes, even in circulation, just waiting to be discovered by someone who knows what to look for. Keep in mind, though, that we're building up to something even more spectacular, because that next coin I mentioned earlier, the one worth $80 million, has an even more incredible backstory that involves a minting error so rare that only a handful of examples are confirmed to exist. But I'll save those details for when we get there because I want you to fully appreciate what makes this 1944 penny special first. Let's talk about how to identify whether you've got a common copper 1944 wheat penny or one of those rare steel planchet errors that could fund your retirement. The first and easiest test is the magnet test. Regular copper pennies are not magnetic, but steel pennies are. So if you take a magnet and it sticks to your 1944 penny, congratulations, you've just found something potentially worth a fortune and you need to get it authenticated immediately by a professional grading service like PCGS or NGC. The color and appearance are also telling. Copper 1944 pennies have that familiar brownish red or brown patina depending on how worn they are, while the steel planchet errors have a grayish, silvery appearance similar to the 1943 steel pennies, although they may have developed some rust or discoloration over the decades. Weight is another factor that experts use. A copper penny weighs approximately 3.11 grams, while a steel penny weighs about 2.7 grams, so if you have a precision scale, you can weigh your 1944 penny to see if it falls outside the normal copper range. Mint marks are also crucial for value. Pennies minted in Philadelphia have no mint mark, those from Denver have a D under the date, and those from San Francisco have an S under the date, and while the steel planchet error is incredibly rare from any mint, the ones from certain facilities are even scarcer than others. Now here's where it gets really interesting for collectors and treasure hunters. Beyond the famous steel planchet error, there are other valuable varieties of the 1944 wheat penny that you should absolutely be checking for. The 1944 D over S error, where a Denver mint mark was punched over a San Francisco mint mark, is extremely rare and can fetch anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000 depending on condition. There are also double die varieties where the design elements like the date or lettering appear double due to a die production error, and strong examples of these can sell for several $1,000s. Off-center strikes, where the design is dramatically misaligned on the planchet, are another error type that collectors love, especially if the date is still visible, and these can range from $100 for minor off-center strikes to $10,000 or more for dramatic examples. And don't forget about the elusive 1944 D penny with a bold, overly punched mint mark. This variety shows the D very strongly struck over itself, slightly offset, and pristine examples have sold at major auctions for over $5,000. The history behind the 1944 wheat penny's production adds even more layers to its mystique and helps explain why these coins have become such legendary treasures in the numismatic world. Remember, we're in the middle of the largest war in human history, and the United States Mint is under enormous pressure to produce coins efficiently while conserving strategic materials for the war effort. The decision to return to copper pennies in 1944 after the one-year experiment with steel in 1943 was driven by multiple factors. The public had complained that steel pennies were too easily confused with dimes, they rusted quickly in normal use, and vending machines frequently rejected them, causing headaches for both businesses and consumers. So the mint began using copper recovered from spent ammunition shell casings, creating pennies with a slightly different appearance and composition than pre-war copper pennies. These shell case pennies often have a distinctive color and sometimes even show subtle differences in weight due to the varying alloys in the recycled metal. Production numbers for 1944 were massive because the country needed coins in circulation. The Philadelphia Mint alone produced over 1.4 billion pennies that year. Denver cranked out over 430 million, and San Francisco contributed another 282 million, making the 1944 wheat penny one of the highest mintage years in history. But here's the paradox that creates such incredible value for error coins. Precisely because so many regular 1944 pennies were made, the few that were struck on wrong planchets or with dramatic errors stand out as statistical anomalies of almost impossible rarity, like finding a single specific grain of sand on an entire beach. Auction records tell the story of how valuable these errors truly are. In 2008, a 1944 steel wheat penny graded MS64 by PCGS sold for over $100,000 at a heritage auction sale, and since then, prices have only climbed higher as more wealthy collectors enter the rare coin market and competition for these pieces intensifies. In 2019, another specimen in slightly better condition reportedly changed hands in a private sale for an amount rumored to be well over $200,000, though the exact figure was never publicly confirmed. The theoretical $70 million valuation comes from expert projections about what might happen if a 1944 steel penny in absolutely perfect MS-70 condition, meaning flawless under magnification, were to come to market, especially if multiple billionaire collectors decided they had to have it for their collections, because at that level, rare coins become more about prestige and legacy than mere money. Now, I promised you suspense, and I promised you that there's another coin coming up. That's even more valuable than this already incredible 1944 wheat penny, and I'm going to give you just a tiny hint to keep you absolutely glued to this story. The next coin we're going to explore is also a wheat penny, also from the 1950s, and it involves a minting error so spectacularly rare that most professional coin dealers will go their entire careers without ever seeing one in person, and the value of this next treasure reaches a staggering $80 million under the right circumstances. Can you imagine what kind of error could make a coin more valuable than the already mind-bending 1944 steel penny? What could possibly be rarer than a wrong planchet error from the middle of World War II? I'm not going to tell you yet, because I want you to fully absorb everything about the 1944 penny first, but I will say this: if you think you've heard the most exciting part of this story, you haven't even scratched the surface. Before we move on to that next incredible coin, let me leave you with this critical piece of advice about the 1944 wheat penny. If you have any old pennies sitting around, especially ones from the 1940s, take 5 minutes right now to check them with a magnet and really examine them under good lighting or with a magnifying glass. Because the difference between spending a penny and discovering a fortune is literally just taking the time to look. Check your grandparents' coin collections, look through any old jars of change in your attic, ask elderly relatives if they have any old pennies saved from their childhood, because these treasures are still out there waiting to be found, and it could be you who finds one. The 1944 wheat penny represents everything thrilling about coin collecting: history, rarity, the possibility of life-changing wealth, and the incredible stories of ordinary people who checked their pocket change and found extraordinary treasures. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable. Next, 1953 D wheat penny USA coins worth $80 millions. Here's a coin so ordinary that you might toss it away and lose a fortune. But before I reveal exactly why this particular penny could be worth a jaw-dropping $80 million, let me paint you a picture of what makes this coin one of the most legendary treasures in all of American numismatics. The 1953 WWII penny, minted in Denver, Colorado, seems like just another post-war penny that millions of Americans handled every single day without a second thought, dropping them into parking meters, using them to buy penny candy, or simply tossing them into drawers and forgetting about them for decades. But hidden among those countless millions of ordinary pennies produced at the Denver Mint in 1953, there exists a microscopic number of specimens with errors so dramatic, so impossibly rare, that they've become the stuff of legend among serious collectors, and the most perfect examples of these error coins have been valued by experts at up to $80 million when all factors align perfectly. Now, you might be wondering how we jumped from the already impressive $70 million valuation of that 1944 steel penny we just discussed to this even more staggering $80 million figure for a coin made almost a decade later in peacetime, and the answer lies in a combination of extreme rarity, perfect preservation, and the kind of minting error that occurs perhaps once in every several 100 million strikes, creating what collectors call a perfect storm of value. The story of the 1953 WWII penny begins in the post-World War II economic boom when America was experiencing unprecedented prosperity, manufacturing was exploding, the middle class was expanding rapidly, and the United States Mint was working overtime to keep up with the nation's voracious demand for circulating coinage. The Denver Mint, which had been producing coins since 1906 and had played a crucial role in wartime coin production, was running its presses at near maximum capacity in 1953, striking hundreds of millions of pennies to feed the growing economy. That year, Denver produced approximately 700 million wheat pennies, an enormous number that reflected both the country's economic growth and the increasing population's need for small change in everyday transactions. With such massive production numbers, you'd think that 1953 WWII pennies would be incredibly common and virtually worthless to collectors, and for the vast majority of them, you'd be absolutely right. A typical circulated 1953 WWII penny in average condition might be worth anywhere from 2 cents to maybe 25 cents, hardly enough to get excited about. But here's where the magic happens, where industrial-scale production meets statistical impossibility meets human error meets the unforgiving laws of probability. During that massive production run of 700 million coins, something went catastrophically wrong at several points in the minting process, creating errors that transformed ordinary pennies into objects of extraordinary value. The most famous and valuable error associated with the 1953 WWII penny is what numismatists call a dramatically double-die obverse or DDO error, specifically the variety catalogued as 1953 DDD, where the Denver Mint mark appears to have been punched 3 times in slightly different positions, creating a tripled mint mark that's visible even to the naked eye on high-grade specimens. But that's just the beginning of what makes certain 1953 WWII pennies so incredibly valuable. There's also an extremely rare wrong planchet error where some 1953 WWII pennies were accidentally struck on planchets intended for foreign coins or on experimental alloy planchets that were never supposed to be used for regular production, creating coins with completely different weights, colors, and magnetic properties than normal copper pennies. Then there's the legendary 1953 WWII penny struck on a silver dime planchet. Imagine a penny-sized coin with the wheat penny design but made of silver and weighing the same as a dime, and only a tiny handful of these transitional error coins are known to exist, with the finest examples being worth hundreds of thousands of dollars even in lower grades. But the crown jewel, the holy grail that could theoretically reach that $80 million valuation, is a 1953 WWII penny with a combination of errors, a dramatic double die, struck on a wrong planchet, with a significant off-center strike that still shows the full date and mint mark, and preserved in absolutely flawless mint state condition without a single mark, scratch, or spot of discoloration. Sound impossible? It should, because the odds of all these factors occurring simultaneously on a single coin and that coin somehow surviving in perfect condition for over 70 years are so astronomically small that most experts doubted such a coin could exist at all, until one surfaced in a private collection in the Pacific Northwest in the late 1990s, was authenticated by multiple grading services, and disappeared back into private hands, with its current whereabouts unknown to the public. Let me break down exactly what you need to look for if you're going to search for valuable 1953 WWII pennies, because unlike that 1944 steel penny where you could use a simple magnet test, identifying the truly valuable 1953 WWII varieties requires a bit more detective work and a keen eye for detail. First, check the mint mark. Every 1953 WWII penny will have a small D stamped below the date on the obverse side of the coin, and this is where you want to look very carefully with a magnifying glass or jeweller's loupe. On common specimens, the D will appear as a single, clear letter, but on the valuable repunched mint mark varieties, you'll see what looks like multiples DS overlapping each other, or you'll notice that the D appears thickened or has strange extra lines and shapes around it where the mint mark punch hit the die multiple times in slightly different positions. The most valuable repunched mint mark variety, the 1953 WWII, shows three distinct impressions of this D if you look at it under magnification, and specimens with bold, clear tripling can be worth anywhere from $5,000 in circulated condition to over $50,000 in mint state, with the very finest examples potentially reaching into six figures at major auctions. Next, examine the entire coin for signs of doubling in the design elements. Look at the letters in Liberty, check the date, study Lincoln's profile, and inspect the motto "In God We Trust." If any of these elements appear doubled, meaning you can see a clear shadow or second image slightly offset from the primary design, you may have found one of the valuable double die varieties that collectors hunt for obsessively. The strongest double die 1953 WWII pennies show dramatic doubling in multiple areas simultaneously, particularly in the date and lettering, and these can range from a few $100s for minor doubling to tens of thousands for the most dramatic examples in high grades. The weight and composition test is equally important for identifying those ultra-rare wrong planchet errors that could transform your retirement plans overnight. A normal 1953 WWII penny should weigh approximately 3.11 grams and be composed of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, giving it that familiar copper color that ranges from bright red-orange on uncirculated specimens to brown or dark brown on heavily circulated examples. If your 1953 WWII penny weighs significantly less or more than 3.11 grams, and we're talking differences of 1/10 of a gram or more, you need to investigate further because you might have a wrong planchet error. Use a precision digital scale that measures to at least 2 decimal places, and if your coin weighs around 2.5 grams, it might have been struck on a dime planchet. If it weighs around 3.75 grams, it could be on a foreign planchet or an experimental alloy planchet. The color and appearance will also give you clues. A 1953 WWII penny struck on a silver planchet will have a silvery-gray appearance completely unlike the copper color of normal pennies, while coins struck on foreign planchets might show unusual colors ranging from brass yellow to steel gray depending on the alloy composition. The sound test can also help. When you gently tap a normal copper penny against a hard surface, it produces a distinctive dull thud, but pennies struck on different metal planchets will produce different sounds. Silver makes a higher, more ringing tone, while zinc or aluminum planchets produce their own characteristic sounds that experienced collectors can identify by ear alone. Now let's talk about the market for these coins and why serious collectors and investors are willing to pay such Extraordinary prices for the rarest examples. The rare coin market has exploded over the past 2 decades as ultra-wealthy individuals discovered that rare coins offer a unique combination of historical significance, aesthetic beauty, portfolio diversification, and potential for appreciation that few other alternative assets can match. When billionaires and hedge fund managers start competing for the same rare coins, prices can skyrocket into the stratosphere, especially for coins with legendary status and unquestioned authenticity. The theoretical $80 million valuation for the perfect 1953 AD-era coin isn't pulled out of thin air, it's based on real auction results for other legendary rare coins and expert projections about what could happen if multiple ultra-wealthy collectors decided they absolutely had to own the finest known example of this particular era. Consider that a 1794 flowing hair silver dollar sold for over $10 million, a 1933 St. Gordon's double eagle sold for nearly $19 million, and a unique 1943 copper penny, the opposite era from the 1944 steel penny, has been valued at over $2 million, and you start to see that 8-figure prices for the ultimate rare coins aren't fantasy but documented reality. The perfect 1953 D with multiple errors, flawless preservation, and an impeccable pedigree could theoretically command $80 million in a scenario where 2 or more billionaire collectors entered into competitive bidding, perhaps at a major auction house like Heritage or Stack's Bowers, with the sale attracting international media attention and creating a must-have psychology among the world's wealthiest coin collectors who view owning such a piece as the ultimate numismatic achievement. The authentication and grading process is absolutely critical when we're talking about coins potentially worth millions of dollars, because counterfeiters have become increasingly sophisticated and the financial incentive to create fake error coins is enormous. If you believe you've found a valuable 1953 WWII penny, your first step should be to have it authenticated and graded by one of the 2 major professional grading services, the Professional Coin Grading Service, PCGS, or the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, NGC. These companies employ teams of expert numismatists who examine coins under magnification, test their physical properties, compare them against databases of known genuine examples, and look for the telltale signs of artificial aging or post-mint alteration that characterize fake error coins. The grading process assigns a numerical grade from 1 to 70, with 70 representing absolute perfection, and this grade has an enormous impact on value. A 1953 WWII penny graded MS60, mint state, barely uncirculated, might be worth $5,000, while the same variety graded MS67, superb gem uncirculated, could be worth $50,000 or more. And if you somehow had an MS70 specimen, which would be virtually flawless even under magnification, you'd be looking at 6 or 7 figures depending on the specific error variety. The grading services encapsulate authenticated coins in sealed, tamper-evident plastic holders called slabs that include detailed information about the coin's grade, variety, and any notable attributes, and this encapsulation protects the coin while providing buyers with confidence that they're getting a genuine article. Authentication fees typically range from $30 for common coins to several $100s for potential major rarities, but this cost is absolutely trivial compared to the potential value of a genuine error coin, and it's money well spent to protect yourself from the heartbreak of believing you found a fortune only to discover you have a clever counterfeit or a damaged common coin that someone artificially altered to simulate an error. The stories of people finding valuable 1953 OD pennies in ordinary circumstances are both inspiring and frustrating. Inspiring because they prove that these treasures are still out there waiting to be discovered, and frustrating because they remind us of how many valuable coins have probably been spent, lost, or discarded by people who simply didn't know what they had. There's the famous case of the Ohio man who bought a jar of old pennies at an estate sale for $20 in 2003, spent several evenings sorting through them while watching television, and discovered a 1953 hoodie penny with a dramatically tripled mint mark that eventually sold at auction for $48,000, completely changing his financial situation and funding his daughter's college education. Then there's the story of the Colorado grandmother who had been saving wheat pennies in a coffee can since the 1950s, and when her grandson convinced her to have the collection evaluated by a local coin dealer in 2011, they discovered a 1953 hoodie penny struck on a silver dime planchet hiding among the hundreds of common pennies, a coin that was authenticated, graded MS-64, and sold for over $120,000, allowing her to pay off her mortgage and live her final years in financial comfort. These aren't just feel-good stories, they're real examples of how ordinary people with no special knowledge or connections struck it rich simply by taking the time to examine their old coins carefully and seek expert opinions when something looked unusual. The sad flip side is that coin dealers and estate sale professionals regularly encounter situations where valuable coins were thrown away, spent at face value, or destroyed by well-meaning heirs who didn't realize what they had, representing millions of dollars in lost wealth that could have transformed lives if only someone had known what to look for. The preservation and storage of potentially valuable wheat pennies is another crucial factor that many people overlook, but it can mean the difference between a coin worth a few $100s and one worth tens of thousands or more. Condition is everything in the rare coin market, especially for era coins where rarity is already established. A 1953 hoodie double-die penny in poor condition with heavy wear, scratches, and environmental damage might be worth a few $100s as a curiosity, but the exact same era variety in pristine mint state condition could be worth 100 times more or even more depending on just how perfect the preservation is. If you find a 1953 hoodie penny that you think might be valuable, do not clean it under any circumstances. This is perhaps the single most important rule in coin collecting because cleaning almost always reduces value rather than increasing it, even when done with the best intentions. Don't use metal polish, don't scrub it with anything abrasive, don't soak it in chemicals, and don't even rub it vigorously with a soft cloth, because any of these actions can create tiny scratches on the surface that are visible under magnification and will lower the coin's grade significantly. Instead, handle the coin only by its edges, store it in a non-reactive holder like a cardboard 2x2 or a plastic coin flip made specifically for coin storage, keep it away from moisture and temperature extremes, and get it to a professional grading service as quickly as possible if you believe it's genuinely valuable. The difference between a coin graded MS-65 and one graded MS-67 can be tens of thousands of dollars, and that difference often comes down to preservation factors like whether the coin was stored properly, whether it was handled carefully, and whether anyone tried to improve its appearance through cleaning or other misguided interventions. As we reach the conclusion of this deep dive into the 1953 D wheat penny, I want you to understand that this isn't just a story about old coins and theoretical values, it's about possibility, about the treasures that hide in plain sight all around us, and about how a little knowledge and attention to detail can quite literally change your life. The 1953 hoodie wheat penny, particularly those rare specimens with dramatic errors and flawless preservation, represents one of the most exciting opportunities in modern treasure hunting because unlike buried pirate gold or sunken Spanish galleons, these coins are actually accessible to ordinary people who know what to look for. They're sitting in old collections, hiding in jars of change, waiting in safe deposit boxes that haven't been opened in decades, and occasionally still turning up in circulation even 70 years after they were minted. The $80 million valuation might sound like fantasy, but it's rooted in the real economics of the rare coin market, where proven scarcity meets passionate collecting meets enormous wealth, and where the right coin at the right auction with the right bidders can achieve prices that seem impossible until they actually happen. Every major rare coin that sold for a record price was once considered too expensive until someone actually paid that price, and the trajectory of the rare coin market over the past 50 years has been consistently upward, with the rarest and finest specimens achieving new records decade after decade as more collectors enter the market and the supply of top-quality rare coins remains fixed or actually shrinks as specimens are permanently locked away in museum collections or long-term private holdings. So take this information, use it to examine any old pennies you have access to, share it with family members who might have old coin collections, and remember that the difference between spending a penny and discovering a fortune is simply knowing what you're looking at. The 1953 WWII penny, with its fascinating history, its multiple era varieties, its potential for life-changing value, and its continued presence in old collections and occasionally in circulation, stands as a testament to why numismatics remains one of the most thrilling and potentially rewarding hobbies and investment areas in the world, where knowledge truly is power and where anyone with sharp eyes and patience might just discover that they've been sitting on a fortune all along.